Welcome to the FRCL Weekly Call. We're a group of distribution leads who get together regularly to discuss works in progress, share ideas, and create opportunities for cross-distro collaboration.
Hey everybody, it is the 29th of July. We are Fedora, RHEL, and CentOS leads, and today we are talking about the imminent retirement of Bugzilla, or, the eventual retirement of Bugzilla. I'm not sure yet. That's what we're here to talk about. As per usual, we're here to talk about things before plans are finalized so that we can actually make better plans. So we are once again joined by Shay De Antonio, who was last here in October, back when we were not publishing things. So we have new FESCO members, we have new leadership, we have faulty memories. And so while we talked about this once, a lot has changed since that time. And I think it's time for us to talk about it again. So I guess just kind of kicking things off, Shay, like, how are things looking for Bugzilla? Like, what are your goals, if not your plans? Because I know you don't have things finalized.
Yeah, so just like you said, we don't have things finalized. When we were looking in the past, when we were teams were moving off Bugzilla within Red Hat into Jira, and so there's lots of teams that were doing that migration. The majority, or almost everyone's moved off. There's still some services that have a few connections to them, but the main tenant, I think, that Bugzilla services is Fedora at this time. And so we have put together plans for retiring Bugzilla at some point, and they kept getting deprioritized for other things. We went through a major elastic migration between data center to cloud, and we kind of put things on hold. And the last time I think we all spoke, trying to make sure we understood the requirements, because Fedora was moving to a new platform. There was the main requirement for Bugzilla from the Fedora team was that there was a read-only instance at least available, or database that could be searched for legacy information. And so we put that into our kind of requirements to make sure that we could facilitate that. And that's still part of our roadmap there. And then what I'm looking to do is at the end of this quarter, try to push an initiative that kind of streamline. Let's make progress on setting a date and getting things in place. So looking for feedback on what Fedora's plans are on their roadmap. And if we can get things together, then I can put together a project plan with a PM and say, this is what we're targeting. Currently, I would like to do it at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year to say, yep, we have set a date, have a date set for then, and then to start taking the steps to do it. The actual work to make Bugzilla read-only is not that complicated. So it's just uncoupling some of the services that we might have that need to be done within ourselves.
Okay, so it sounds like, at least at the present moment, your schedule is kind of based on Fedora and Apple's schedule.
To a degree, yeah. And there, like I said, there's a handful of things internally that we discovered, like, oh, this tool is still connected to Bugzilla to make its workflow work. And we're like, oh, well, we need to find a path forward for that. So as we identify those, we're putting that into, like, how do we handle this?
Okay, well, I think it would be fair to say that we're not as far along as we'd hoped with moving all the things to Forjo. But also, I don't think we have a final determination on whether Forjo is the place where we're moving to. So while we're not decision-making on that on this call, we can at least talk about that space some and what is feasible when. So Tomasz, if you could, can you share any of your early thoughts on how things are shaping up, like priority-wise and timing-wise?
Yep, sure. So to being able to replace Bugzilla, to have the one-on-one functionality, I think we are pretty far away in Forjo land, because we are missing a bunch of crucial features, which are not only our requirements. There are other groups that requested those features from upstream. So it's like they are doable and they are in some sense on a roadmap. The Forge team currently is working on one of the big hurdles that is stopping adoption as a replacement for Bugzilla, but it's not the only one. And I believe there needs to be a discussion inside Fedora, inside the packaging community, and inside the leadership of maybe thinking about approaching the tracking of bugs for packages a little bit differently. I don't know how. I have no idea. It's just that if we do the same thing and just copy it over to Forjo, we will have to implement a lot of new things in the Forjo, because similar to GitLab, similar to GitHub, similar to any other Git repository, its primary use case is not tracking bugs in general, it's tracking bugs per repository. So there is a huge difference as it goes. But we would like to have most of the features implemented by the end of this year.
We'd like to, but it's not by any means certain that we will. Okay. So, Neil, you're adding some things in the chat. Can you bring that to the microphone?
Well, so the last time we talked about this, I sent, which was in October, November, I sent an email to Shay about this. And so I'm bringing the suggestion back up again that I think it would actually be worth it to reach out to the upstream Bugzilla people who now have an independent nonprofit entity, as well as the main developers have a consulting and managed services business, about an arrangement in which we move our data out of Red Hat Bugzilla into a dedicated Fedora Bugzilla instance, and essentially fund them to close I think the last few gaps that I'm aware of that exist within the Bugzilla Harmony, the next version of Bugzilla that we would want, which is the SSO support that Red Hat Bugzilla has added custom, and a few other things. Like upstream Bugzilla has Markdown support, for example. They've got limited features for being able to edit comments and stuff like that for users, as well as the top description, like what we have in Red Hat Bugzilla, and that sort of thing. And it would allow our integrations to keep over. Most of the IDs would be stable. Essentially, not that much has to change. We'd probably stop calling it RHBZ because it's not the Red Hat Bugzilla anymore, but like very little has to break on that, and workflows and reports and things like that for me as a maintainer. That stuff really makes my life easier when I'm trying to figure out stuff I need to do and take to upstreams and things like that. And my previous experience in other projects where they moved to Forge type trackers, this is incredibly hard and becomes essentially unmanageable at scale. Tag soup is not fun, is basically what I'll kind of summarize that to be. I gave much more specific feedback to Shay, along with some links to why other projects which have much larger bases of tracking issues have also chosen not to move to a Forge-based tracker solution and maintain their Bugzilla instance for this reason. But like, I think it's worth saying that we should consider a gap analysis with Red Hat Bugzilla features that Fedora uses, upstream Bugzilla, and what it would take to close that gap, because it actually might be less work. And there are people motivated that we can support as a community to do that sort of thing.
So I will have just one question, because in the ideal world where we get the upstream support, we are able to migrate the data. Who is running the Bugzilla?
I mean, that is a good question. The guy who has a consulting business also will run Bugzilla instances for you if you want them to. If you want to run it yourself like you did now, then that's obviously another operational question. like the operational question of who wants to run it or who's going to run it is something that I like is entirely under Red Hat control and is not something we in Fedora are allowed to have a conversation about because we don't control and we don't run the infrastructure. So like this is the same reason why we have Discourse, why we have element matrix services. This is not an opportunity that we on the Fedora side are allowed to have a voice on because we don't get to run it or make those decisions. So that's not a conversation that I'm going to really say much about because it's not something I get to have a call on.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I'll briefly touch on kind of what I think I mentioned in the last time we had this call a couple months ago, and then more importantly, what I think might be a feasible action plan for how we figure this out. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but in the last time we had this call, to me, there's a huge value in having our issue reporting and the source code for our RPM specs in the same place. And I can see that there would be a lot of real challenges that we would surely have to figure out because we're a 23-year-old project and we've never had that kind of workflow before. So I think there is a very realistic, like, it's not just that we flip a switch and it's all easy and it's just going to work fine. But I think that's really the pattern when I look around the open source landscape today. And I know that distributions are different and we have lots of reasons to be different. I have never been able to understand why we have to be so different in this way of taking bug reports. And like I mentioned in the last call, I struggle with Bugzilla as a package maintainer. I'm not doing packaging every day, but there's a few things that I maintain. And it's always like someone's always having to chase me to like catch up on Bugzilla and keep up with my responsibilities as a packager because it's so hard for me to engage and use those tools. Whereas stuff like Forge, I'm really happy with Forjo. I think we have a great upstream. To Neil's point, we would own that infrastructure because we will presumably will be self-hosting the dist-git version of Forjo down the line. I think that's been rehashed a lot, and I don't want to spend too much time on like Bugzilla or no Bugzilla, but I think perhaps what we need to do is to take a moment to consult the wider community, because I think in this group, there's a lot of very strong opinions. And I think I've heard people from this call and last call that go both ways, for and against. But maybe we need to think about something like an actual survey or like a way of really polling the wider contributor community. And I don't know, the part I'm stuck on is like, how wide should we do this? Should we be focusing more on just the contributors who are maintaining stuff? Do we also want to consider users in that response? Do we want to consider how Fedora users would weigh in on where they'd like to, or what would be the easiest way for them to report bugs and share feedback upstream? Because if I look at my experience, you know, I'm not doing that in Bugzilla right now. Like I'm sharing feedback in other places. So to me, I'm like, maybe we need to think about a more organized campaign to do a survey, or how can we actually poll either just the contributor community or contributor community plus a wider net of Fedora Linux users about this question. Because I think if we just talk about it here, we'll be talking in circles because people have very strong opinions. And I'd expect nothing less than that, but maybe we need to broaden out a little bit than just this group of people so that we can actually understand what the 22 people who aren't, you know, or the 22 people who are here have opinions, but what about the hundreds of other people in the community? I'd like to really get a better sense of that, because I think that would inform my perspective of like, oh, hey, maybe we could look at an upstream Bugzilla if that's really what people want. And, you know, that's the desired solution. And a majority of our package maintainers say that, then okay, well, maybe we really need to think about having this conversation with upstream Bugzilla and how we can better support them. To me, I just don't have the data to really not just have the same cyclical conversation over and over and over again that we've been having for almost a year, if not longer. Over.
Okay, I just want to mention that there's a lot of sidebar text chatter that I would like to encourage people to pull back into the conversation, but I want to provide a few parameters or thoughts here. The first is that no matter what, a change is coming, right? There is a future date, and it's probably somewhere around 5 to 6 months from now, where bugzilla.redhat.com as is going to go read only. It might be a little earlier, it might be a little bit later. It's going to be in collaboration to the extent possible, but that's going to happen. Where those tickets go next is somewhat negotiable, but I think there are some probably hard limits. Like, absent something else coming up, these are the possibilities that I see. One is that we move to Forjo. And I think Neil's right in saying that an issue forge has serious drawbacks versus an issue tracking system. And like my inner project manager knows how to get great data out of Bugzilla. I do not have complementary skills in Forjo. Part of that is because I can just write a SQL query for Bugzilla data and get exactly what I want. Not quite the same level of functionality in Forjo. On the other hand, one of the reasons why we're in Forjo in the first place is that it is open source. We're trying to put our energies into bolstering communities and making open source a good default. And my assumption is that if Fedora goes down the Forjo path, that we will need to put developer energy into developing some of those features that we feel the lack of. That would be, I think, a win for Fedora. I think it'd be a win for the open source community. Like, there's all kinds of win there. It's also, I think, safe to say that if the path is not Forjo, then there is going to be a question of, well, how is that going to be supported? I believe it would be accurate to say that Red Hat would support Fedora and Apple moving to Jira. That would be great for some of our developers. They'd have complementary workflow. I think there's some values questions in the community that would need to be answered. But Justin's suggestion about a survey might provide more valid data from which to do decision making. One thing that seems very unlikely to me, though, is that if we wanted to just pursue an alternate Bugzilla provider, that feels like the worst of both worlds, because we are putting resources into something that is not long-term a goal for any project here. And I doubt that if there was a funding requirement that we would be able to justify it, especially in light of the ability or the availability of both Jira and Forjo being staffed already. So I'll stop there, and Carl, you're up next.
Definitely appreciate all the perspectives so far, and realizing there's probably no perfect solution. Everything can, have drawbacks and get picked apart, pros and cons of everything. But one thing Justin said that I wanted to bolster and agree with is about having issues in the same place. A persistent problem we have right now is packagers that will look at their pull requests, but don't look at Bugzilla at all whatsoever. They set up an email filter for their Bugzilla emails, and they never look at the folder. I am routinely having to pester friends of mine and say, hey, did you see that comment I left on this bug? Or do you see this new bug you have? Or do you realize how many CVE bugs you have on this package? It is a rampant problem. It is very bad. I think that moving to Jira would just be the same thing in an even worse interface. Jira's Bugzilla people are like, yeah, it's okay, or I don't like it. Jira people virulently hate it. So that problem would get worse. I think that is a strong point in favor, and a mix of pros and cons to Justin's idea about suggestion about the value of having bugs and the package sources in the same place.
Thanks, Carl. Maxwell, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm a little concerned that it's planned to sunset Bugzilla at the end of the year if we're not sure that Forjo or anything else is actually going to be up and running by the end of the year. Because from what I've heard, it does not seem that everything for Forjo is going to be up at the end of the year, even if that is what we want to migrate to in the first place, which is not entirely clear to me.
Yeah. So that's me estimating, but Shay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, so again, I'm not saying a hard date like end of the year. That's why I'm part of this conversation is like, I want to work with you guys on a reliable timeline to understand your plans. Because last time we talked, you moved to Forjo, and my impression was you were almost closely there. And then it was just the requirement back to us is make sure that we had a read-only instance and that you had the access to it. You started talking about what was the possibilities of doing that, and it's feasible. But if we could get some kind of understanding of where your path is landing and what it would take to get there, then I can go work with my team and my leadership and say, based upon the inputs, here's a reasonable timeline. I mean, within reason, right? I can't say indefinitely. We'd have to put something, a stake in somewhere and start saying we need to march towards this.
Yep. Aoife, go ahead.
I'm all for stakes, Shay. So I actually want to roll this back a fair bit because people are talking about, oh, it has to be Bugzilla, it has to be Jira, it has to be this. We're absolutely putting the cart before the horse, and it has been mentioned, but probably not like highlighted enough that we don't know all of the requirements and we don't know what we need. We have individual ideas, but as a community, and I'm speaking from the Fedora perspective, because I think that's actually what we're talking about. I've yet to hear, well, RHEL is not moving. We know where RHEL is gone. Like, RHEL is out of the equation in this one. I've yet to hear from the CentOS folks, and Pat might have some insight in there as well. But like, if we're speaking from a Fedora point of view, I would strongly encourage us to firstly find out whose problem this is to solve. Is it the CLE team? Is it the Fedora Council? Is it FESCO? Is it a combination of all of the groups? But we do need some kind of a working group to own this problem for Fedora and then start with the basics like we did with Forge, which wasn't perfect, but we've got somewhere with it, of the usual like mailing list. Please send your requirements. Please identify who you are in the project. What's your what's it called? Not an actor, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, what's your use case? What do you need? Gather the requirements, and then please examine against potential options. We ran it as an ARC team that Tomasz headed up for when we were moving from Pagure over to Forge. Like I said, it wasn't perfect, but it did work. So I really, really would like to support the idea that we, Fedora, take that approach again, and probably need to do it sooner rather than later, because 5 months to the end of the year in December is a write-off. So 4 months, we need to start. Pat,
I'm going to skip the line really quick and just say the reason why I'm mentioning Forgio and Shay's here on behalf of Bugzilla and also Jira is that those are two things that we can commit resources to. Like that is those are investments that Red Hat has made, and everything else is if anything else comes up, like Neil's suggestion of Bugzilla, that would be a thing to evaluate. But when there are two available resources, investing in a third one is going to be challenging to justify. That doesn't change the fact that the community may discover that there is this perfect third thing that we should consider. I don't want to understate how much that could be a long shot if it requires resources that we don't have.
And to your point, Brendan, super quick, like speaking from Fedora Council hat on, to hear that we have viable options already to investigate against requirements that we turn up is great. That actually cuts an awful lot of work of sitting down and figuring out what's our shortlist. The fact that we can put two on there, and we may as a community decide that we should investigate upstream Bugzilla hosting too. Am I saying that right? But that's great that we have options, but we don't know what our requirements for those options are to weight them against one another or a third.
Okay. All right, Pat, go ahead.
Yes. Aoife was just barely ahead of me. I have much the same to say, but to put it in the fancy projecty terms, we need a bunch of user stories about what's going on. I hate user stories. I hate writing user stories. I don't see a way around that to keep us from going back and forth in circles. We also need some good workflow maps on what the actual workflows that are live today around pull requests and around Bugzilla tickets and around, honestly, how Bodhi integrates with it and all of those, to understand what types of integration points we're currently using and to weigh them against the actual user stories of what workflows we want to enable. I suspect a fair bit of our circular problems is, again, like as Aoife said exactly, we have somewhere between no and meaningfully underdefined requirements. And until we get strong data points on that end, it's hard to establish a consensus because we don't precisely know what we're agreeing or disagreeing over. And so I feel like I'm just repeating everything that Aoife said, but to just sort of weigh, from the CentOS hat on, my workflows essentially consist of, if I want something done, I get it into Jira somehow, and it is what it is. And whether that's lovely or frustrating depends on the day of the Jira interface update process. But if we're looking to establish what we have, we need to understand how those workflows integrate and then what workflows they enable. We have 20 years of administrative value add hiding around in Bugzilla. I don't want that to go nowhere, but understanding how we preserve that knowledge is an important but tacitly secondary thing to my mind.
Thanks, Pat. Sounds like that's another +1 for surveying. Troy.
I'm going to put my CentOS hats on because the question was asked, how does this affect CentOS? CentOS Stream, we're Jira. But that's CentOS Stream. CentOS, the project, most all of the SIGs and the things either had things on GitLab or Pagure issue trackers, but the Pagure ones pretty much moved over to GitLab. So I don't think CentOS as a project has much skin in this game, if that's the right term. So I just wanted to let that be said, and then I'm going to step back.
Okay, so Jakob, I'm going to preempt you for just a second. I got a sidebar comment that there was a little bit that I might have been ambiguous. I'm not saying that we can't explore other things. I'm saying that there are obstacles to other things when we have funded things. So the investigation is very much worthwhile. Like finding out what is right for the community is very much worthwhile. Some things are going to be easier for us to say yes to than others. That's the main insight here. But by all means, like find out what is the right thing for your stakeholders. Like that is job one. Yakov, go ahead.
Okay, a few points. I'll try to go quickly. First, the idea that having everything on the Forge will make things better seen. Sorry, but experience shows I'm not convinced. Somebody showed some slide or something at a recent conference that showed that I have I'm like in the top 3 of PRs across Fedora in the last, I don't know how far back that goes, besides Packet, which is a bot. Churchyard, myself, and there was one other. Sorry, I forgot the other one was. But I'm like top 3, top 5. I'm right up there in terms of PRs. PRs are in our Forge, Packer, right? Source.fedora.org, fedoraproject.org, and you know what? So many times they don't get seen either. So I'm not really convinced that having things in the Forge solves our problems of things getting seen. People aren't going to set their emails notifications or their filters or whatever, look at actually what they get. I don't know that that's going to solve the problem because it doesn't. I see that PRs all the time. I file so many PRs and they do not get seen. So I'll just leave it at that. But but in terms of what we're saying, I mean, the decommissioning Red Hat Bugzilla primarily sounds like it primarily affects Fedora. This is a Fedora problem primarily because Red Hat's already done its part of pulling out of Red Hat Bugzilla. Obviously, there needs to be a read-only instance for historical reasons, for even for RHEL also. Who knows? But this is a Fedora problem. I don't, and if you kind of hinted at this, but I don't think this has been really emphasized, is that, Fedora went through this whole process of figuring out how to get off of Pagura. They decided Pagura has a limited lifetime. We need to get off of it. They went through this whole process of setting up a group to figure out what the options were, explore all the options, bring it to the community, whatever. This whole process, it took whatever. We got to where we got to today. Whatever you think about the process, whatever, but there was a process. For some reason, that process doesn't seem to be happening with Bugzilla. The same thing is happening. We need to get off of Bugzilla, Red Hat Bugzilla specifically. This is a Fedora problem. Fedora, similarly, the council needs to commission a group of people and go through the same kind of process that we went through to get off Pagura and find out what the options are and whatever. But this is a Fedora problem. This really isn't a Freckle problem. This is a Fedora problem. And Fedora we just did this one way, but we're not doing this now. Why aren't we doing this now? And let's get that process started relatively quickly, because it sounds like there's not a lot of time here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in October, but now it feels more serious. So hopefully we have follow-ups this time around. Neil, then Aoife.
So the reason why it feels like this is because this is actually how the Forge move process started too. Because in 2020, someone decided, oh yeah, we're just going to yoink Pagure and then we'll replace it with GitLab. Everyone freaked out, and then everything got put on pause. So we're literally going through the same process exactly the same way it happened the last time. So don't worry, Yakov. This is how it works. Someone freaks the fuck out. This happens. We blow up. Everything falls apart, and then we actually then start talking to people to figure it out, because nobody actually wants to talk to people until after everyone freaks out, and then we talk to people, and then we figure it out. So we're on track. Don't worry about it. We're good. And that's not a little bit of I'm not a little bit salty at all about that. Not even a little bit.
I have so many thoughts to share, but Aoife's hand was up first. Aoife, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I turned off my camera. I think the internet is not great in this particular office. I can hear the smile in your voice when you said that, Neil. Don't worry. But yeah, genuinely, let's learn from past experiences. And we did go through somewhat of a process that did actually work in our favor. So I'll return to one of the points that I've made. Who owns this problem? And I am fine for it to be Fedora Council. I do think it is definitely one of the governance bodies of Fedora. I would be quite open to working with FESCO in this particular endeavor. I'm speaking from my own personal opinion, but I don't see why it can't be a joint effort. But I think we need to identify an owner for this problem, and then we can work with, I would like to formally then request from the CLE team some support in doing some requirements gathering and investigations into options that you feel that you can provide reasonable resources into doing. And if that has to be a horse trade of like, we can commit to looking into these two things, we don't have capacity for this third thing that people would like, then that's fine. We have to just be grown-ups and accept that. So who wants to own it? Everybody for council, or everybody for council and FESCO? Or is it the same thing?
By the way, if your hand is up and you've got like the green thing because you're the first in line, just go ahead.
That's me. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is largely a FESCO matter because the main users of Bugzilla are packagers. The only types of bugs that are reported there are packaging bugs. And obviously we collaborate with various other teams, such as QA and testing and various other people that need to, and also Aoife, as part of the changes process, works with Bugzilla. So there's a lot of other people who work on it. So I do think it's important that I think it's FESCO, potentially with council support, potentially with the CLE ARC team support to investigate this and make a decision that everyone, maybe not everyone's happy on it, but at least we have a consensus with all the people who are actually stakeholders in this.
Okay, so how do we move forward with this? Because like we talked about in October, and then there was no substantial follow-up. So are people committing to do follow-ups in their respective leadership posts? Aoife, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just offer some services, Brendan, is all. Yeah, I think generally speaking, people do feel it is a FESCO issue because it's so technically embedded in the project. So as a paid person from Red Hat to support Fedora, I'm more than happy to put my hat forward if FESCO will work with me to gather some requirements and start driving this a little bit more meaningfully. And I would also like the support of the CLE product owner too, because I think ultimately this will fall to your team, and I think they're the best placed person as well to give some guidance. That's the proposal.
We'd be happy to work with you as always, Aoife.
Thanks, Maxwell. I'm taking you as speaking for everyone. But would it help to open a ticket?
We love you, Aoife.
Would it actually, those in serious, help to open a ticket to FESCO requesting this, and then we just assemble a little Thunderbirds team?
I think that makes sense.
And yes, Fabio, it should be an initiative. The goddamn Forge one was an initiative, but they're changing. Hey, we might need to sandbox this.
Oh, hey, Kevin, by the way, you're echoing. I'm not sure if it's because you're like, oh, I want to say something, but you're echoing.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. But I was hoping you were going to weigh in like, oh, by the way, I solved this problem last week. I just forgot to mention it, but alas. Okay, so quick question for everybody who's been following the sidebar chat. Is there anything that has shown up there that should be covered verbally here? Okay, then
I guess just to reiterate, it sounds like we've tentatively agreed on that FESCO, Aoife, and potentially an ARC team from CLE is going to be taking the lead on identifying requirements for this and moving forward.
okay, that sounds good to me. One thing that's on my mind is that for the Forjo decision, we took 1 year for the ARC process and then another year to get to where we are right now. And that is 4 times longer than the kind of time window that we're contemplating here. Again, not a confirmed date, but at some point we will run out of runway. So I don't think we can afford to take 2 years, much less 1 year to get requirements. So there's a time crunch on this one that didn't exist for the Forjo decision. Kevin, then Steve.
Yeah, just real quick. We did actually do a fairly lengthy investigation a while back, like 10 years ago or something like that. And I think there's a wiki page that has a whole bunch of the requirements we identified at that time. And a lot of that may be out of date now or not matter, but maybe that's something to start with, or pull a bunch of stuff from that is already identified, that can help us kickstart the process. And I'm happy to get that wiki page and information to everybody. And the second thing I will point out is that we also probably need stakeholders from the QE folks, because they deal with Bugzilla a lot more than perhaps anyone else. And I think they will have some requirements or some input on things they need or whatnot. So we probably should pull in, Adam or some folks from the QE group. So that's it.
Thanks, Kevin. Steve.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up just real quick on, and you're right, by the way, Brendan, the statement about how long it took for requirements gathering and stuff like that for JO related work. I think the key here is to prioritize at a high priority the requirements gathering and to make space for that to happen. I think a pitfall we hit before was having so many people doing it, along with all of those people having multiple priorities on their plate that were considered higher priority than the other work. And that just led to things going on and on and on and on. So if we can, make sure to carve out the time for the folks who will be focusing on this, I think we'll have a much tighter and much more specific result that we're looking for. Go ahead, Fabio.
Does my microphone work now? It shows up.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I just wanted to put a suggestion out there. Maybe we can handle this requirements gathering a bit differently this time. I think last time it was mostly, hey, we're looking for requirements, please tell us. Maybe it would work more quickly if we actually reach out to all the different teams and say, hey, we're working on this, please tell us what are your specific requirements as team QE or packages or FESCO or change wrangler or whatever. I think that might yield results more quickly.
That sounds right to me, Fabio. Maxwell.
Well, I was just going to say I'm worried that there's a lot of things happening at the same time because this is happening, and then also figuring out what to do with Bugzilla is being tacked on to the figuring out what to do with Discit. So I just want to make sure that we're not swallowing too much at once here, because I know we're already trying to get the Discit stuff out as fast as possible, and now we're also trying to get the Bugzilla stuff out as fast as possible. And there's only so many people who are on CLE to actually work on these things.
So, sorry for my video being off, but it's the connection. I will have something to add to this, Maxwell. Like we were in a rush to move out of Pagure.io, and it had its reasons, which is not the same for Discit. Like Discit is a relatively closed system compared to Pagure.io, which was accessible to the public. We are not really in a rush to move away from Pagure in situation of Discit. We do plan to do it rather sooner than later, but not before we have the feature parity for that.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I guess also, but obviously we can't migrate the bugs to Forjo if we don't have Discit migrated first, I don't think.
No, we could, because Discit doesn't have, because we have the tracker turned off on Discit, and it just would, like, whatever we do, whether it's a new Fedora Bugzilla instance, whether we do a weird Jira thing, or if we're or whatnot, the only option that is blocked would be if we decided to use Forjo issues, because the Forjo tracker has to, the Forjo migration has to happen first for that. But any other option that is a disparate system, we can use. But if all the other options are immediately thrown out anyway, then yeah, then we're blocked on the Discit migration.
Yeah, that was pretty much my point. We can't migrate the issues to Forjo Discit if we don't have Forjo Discit in the first place.
Well, we can, because we still can just run the issues. We can and point from Pagure to the issue trackers.
So before we descend deeper into technical solutioning, because I want to do it as much as you do, I'll just mention that I'm expecting an update on Discit planning coming out sometime soon from CLE, and that I'm hearing a few takeaways. One is that Kevin is going to dig up and find the last time we investigated migrating off of Bugzilla, just as a starting point, and that both members of FESCO and the Fedora Council are going to work together in the Fedora space to begin an actual investigation into what end users need for this. And while I think it is true that we want members of the quality team to be engaged in that investigation, I wouldn't expect that to follow from the conversation here. I would expect that to follow from the community conversation that follows from here. So while that may come around to me and my team as part of that community, like that's like our goal here is to activate you as leads in your spaces and vice versa. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions or suggestions for Shay? Aoife, go ahead.
Oh, not a suggestion for Shay, but actually while I think of it, Shay, I know you're giving us a timeline that's an approx, and you've said, I hope that I'm not mishearing it for my own purposes, that you're willing to work with us if it takes us slightly longer. Obviously, that's not infinite. Is that true? So
Yeah.
while you're saying
Yeah.
December, if we need to like March, that's not the biggest problem.
So again, we spun up an initiative. We did a bunch of research. We said, oh, this is how we could progress. We had other things that kind of pushed this down. I knew you guys were moving forward. I hate to admit this, but I was kind of waiting to hear like, oh yeah, we're done. And then I could kick off my thing. But so I was asked if there's someone, you said within Red Hat, that's like a project manager or something that's going to help organize all this. I would love to connect with them to see what you need from us and like what we can do to help facilitate anything, including timelines.
Oh, that will likely be either Tomasz or myself or both, with maybe Brendan, Steve, others in a support there.
So I'm offering to work with you and help any way we can, and then also tighten things up on my end to say, okay, here's better, like here's our action plan. This is how we're marching forward. I mean, if we can align on that, that would probably be helpful for both ends.
Okay, thank you. Brian, I just had one other comment. I know a suggestion was made about a survey. I've spent some time with Greg. We've been talking about surveys lately. I cannot advocate to not do surveys unless you are a statistician by trade, because they're impossible to do good.
It's easy to do them bad.
Exactly.
Or more to the point, it's easy to experience hindsight as 20/20 the minute you run them.
Yeah, we'll probably just stick to good old-fashioned digging up the link that Kevin shared, start from there, reshare that out to mailing lists and discourse, and just go fishing through Commons.
Okay. Last call. Anybody? Anything else? All right, then let's wrap it here. Thanks for the discussion today. Shay, thank you for coming. I will see you all next time. Bye.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all. Bye.